The cafe was warm, a small refuge from the biting cold of the city. It was the kind of place where people went to escape the hustle of everyday life, to be left alone, even if just for a moment. The soft hum of quiet conversations and the gentle clink of coffee cups were the backdrop to her thoughts. She was a single mother, always on the move, juggling work and motherhood. Life had become a delicate balance, one that constantly shifted, often tipping over. It wasn't easy, but she had learned to make do. Her little one, a bright-eyed child full of questions, needed her, and that was enough to keep her going. Today, though, was different. She had promised herself this afternoon would be for her, a rare break, where she wouldn't have to rush to pick up groceries, answer work emails, or run from one task to the next. She had only an hour, but it was hers, and that mattered. As she sat down with her coffee, the steam rising in little curls, she allowed herself to relax. The tension in her shoulders, built up from days of stress, slowly began to ease. She took a sip, enjoying the warmth that spread through her. For a moment, she could pretend her life wasn't so complicated. But then, just as she closed her eyes, trying to embrace the rare moment of peace, she heard it. The sound of the door opening. Footsteps quick and familiar. The unmistakable rhythm of someone who knew exactly where they were going. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. Her ex. The thought of him still sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't just the divorce. It was everything that had come with it. The arguments, the broken promises, the emotional toll. She had moved on, or at least she told herself she had. But when he was around, it felt like all the old feelings rushed back in an instant. She didn't want to deal with him today, not in this small cafe where she had come to breathe. She had promised herself she wouldn't let him ruin this, but as always, he saw her first. His eyes locked onto hers, a smirk forming on his lips as he made his way toward her. Her stomach churned. She had to think quickly. Her gaze swept around the room, and that's when she saw him, a man sitting at a table by the window, deep in conversation with his own thoughts. He was alone, sipping a cup of tea, completely unaware of the drama unfolding just a few feet away. Without giving herself a chance to second guess, she stood up and walked towards him. Her heart raced not just from the tension of the moment, but from the weight of what she was about to do. She approached him with a forced smile. "Hi. Sorry to bother you," she started, her voice low enough so only he could hear. "I know this might sound strange, but I really need your help." The man glanced up from his cup, a brief look of surprise crossing his face. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unsure of what was happening. She didn't give him a chance to respond. "It's just that my ex is here, and I really don't want to deal with him right now," she continued, her words tumbling out more quickly than she intended. "Would you mind, pretending to know me for a bit? Just so he doesn't cause a scene." There was a moment of silence between them, and for a split second she wondered if she had gone too far. Maybe he'd think she was crazy, or worse, he'd refuse. But then he set down his cup with a calm smile. "Sure," he said simply. "No problem." It was a relief, though she couldn't quite understand why he agreed so easily. But she didn't have time to dwell on it. The door opened again, and she could feel her ex's gaze on her. She quickly sat down beside the stranger, still pretending to know him, feeling the warmth of the moment as her ex approached. The moment she sat down next to him, the tension in her chest loosened just a little. Her ex, still standing by the door, watched her with narrowed eyes. It was as if he couldn't understand why she was sitting with someone. But then again, he never understood her. The man beside her, the one who had agreed to her strange request, didn't seem at all fazed by the awkwardness of the situation. He simply took another sip of his tea, completely calm and collected, as though this were the most natural thing in the world. His presence was surprisingly soothing. She forced a smile, hoping it was enough to cover the growing discomfort. "Thank you," she whispered, glancing up at him. "I wasn't sure what to do. He always does this. He just doesn't get it." The man gave a small nod, his eyes scanning the room as if he were lost in thought. She had no idea who he was or what his life was like, but there was something about him that put her at ease. He had an air of confidence that seemed to radiate without him needing to say a word. She turned back to her ex, who was still standing there, watching them. He hadn't moved, and now, it seemed as though he was trying to decide what to do next. She held her breath, wondering if he would approach them or just stand there until she did something. Finally, after what felt like forever, her ex took a few steps toward their table. Her heart sank, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was just temporary, she reminded herself. She just had to get through this moment. Who's this? Her ex's voice was sharp, his gaze lingering on the man next to her. She could feel the stranger beside her tense slightly. But he didn't flinch. Instead, he looked up at her ex, his voice steady and calm. "This is my friend," the stranger said, his words flowing with an ease that surprised her. "We were just catching up." Her ex looked skeptical, his eyes narrowing as if trying to read the situation. But the stranger didn't give him an inch. "Well, it's nice to meet you," her ex muttered, though it was clear he wasn't happy with the answer. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, but the stranger didn't let it show. He smiled politely, then shifted his gaze back to her. She glanced at him, grateful for how he was handling everything. She couldn't help but wonder who this man really was. He was so calm, so self-assured. It was hard to imagine he was just a random person. He had a presence, something about him that made her feel like she could lean on him for support. Her ex lingered for a moment longer, clearly not ready to leave. He crossed his arms over his chest, his eyes still fixed on them. "Don't forget who you're dealing with," he said, his voice low. She stiffened, the old feeling of dread creeping back. But before she could respond, the stranger stood up, the smooth motion drawing both of their attentions. "I think we're done here," the stranger said, his tone casual but firm. "We're just two people having a conversation, nothing more." Her ex didn't like being brushed off, and it was clear from his expression that he wasn't used to it. But he didn't argue. Instead, he shot her one last look, full of frustration and something darker, before he turned and walked out of the cafe without another word. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The quiet was deafening after he left, the kind of silence that felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders. She turned to the stranger, her smile coming more naturally this time. "Thank you," she said again. "You really didn't have to do that." The man simply shrugged, taking a seat again. "No problem," he said, his voice warm. "Sometimes it's easier to get people to leave when they think you're with someone else." She laughed, though it was tinged with a hint of embarrassment. She hadn't meant to put him in that position, but he had handled it so effortlessly. She was starting to wonder just who he really was. "So, what's your name?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. For the first time, the stranger hesitated as though he wasn't sure how to respond. "Let's just say I'm someone who enjoys a quiet afternoon," he said, his smile friendly but vague. "But you can call me Adam." Her mind raced, but she didn't press. He had been kind, and that was enough for now. She sat there for a moment, silently sipping her coffee, the brief exchange with her ex still fresh in her mind. But then, she turned back to him, hoping to keep the conversation going. "Do you come here often?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Adam's eyes twinkled with a hint of amusement, as though he had seen this question coming from a mile away. "Not really," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I was just passing through. But sometimes it's nice to take a break from the usual routine." She nodded, understanding what he meant. The routine. It was the same every day, wasn't it? Work, home, repeat. There was never time to just be. It was something she had learned to accept, though she couldn't help but wish for something more. "So what do you do?" she asked, genuinely curious now. Adam's eyes seemed to flicker with something she couldn't quite place, but his expression remained calm. "Let's just say I have a job that keeps me busy," he said with a small smile. She was about to ask more, to press him further, but then he glanced at the time on his phone. "I'm afraid I have to go soon," he said, standing up. She felt a strange pang of disappointment, though she tried to hide it. "Of course," she said quickly, standing up too. "I'm sure you have things to do." But before he could leave, he turned to her, his expression more serious now. "If you ever need someone to talk to," he said softly, "or just need a break from all the chaos, don't hesitate to reach out." She didn't know why, but his words hit her harder than she expected. She had been so caught up in surviving, in dealing with the day-to-day, that she hadn't really thought about the possibility of someone else being there. Someone who wasn't her ex, someone who wasn't tied to her past. She swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you," she said again. And with that, Adam smiled and walked out of the cafe, leaving her standing there, watching him disappear into the bustling street. Days passed. and the memory of the encounter with the stranger, Adam, began to fade into the background. Life, as it always did, swept her up again. She found herself buried under work, caring for her child and managing her responsibilities. It was easy to get lost in the chaos of her day-to-day life, but there were moments when she couldn't help but think back to that afternoon in the cafe. It wasn't just about her ex or the uncomfortable situation she'd been in. It was the way Adam had handled everything with such calm and ease, like he was exactly the person she needed at that moment. His presence had been unexpectedly reassuring, and the way he spoke to her had felt different. It was as if he saw more than just the woman sitting there, trying to escape her past. She found herself hoping, even if only for a brief second, that she might bump into him again. But with her busy schedule and the relentless pace of her life, that seemed like a distant possibility. Then, one afternoon, a few days later, as she was preparing to head to work, she received a message that made her heart skip a beat. It was from a number she didn't recognize. The message was simple: "I hope you're doing well. I've been thinking about our conversation and wanted to reach out again. If you'd like to grab a coffee sometime, let me know." Her heart raced. She hadn't expected to hear from him again. Maybe it was just a polite gesture, but something about the message felt different. It wasn't just a casual invitation. There was a sincerity behind it that she couldn't ignore. She sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. The idea of meeting him again both excited and unnerved her. She had no idea who he really was, what his life was like, or why he had even bothered to help her in the first place. But there was a pull, a curiosity she couldn't shake. She had to know more. She quickly typed out a response. "I'd love that. How about tomorrow afternoon?" The reply came almost instantly. "Tomorrow works. I'll see you then." And just like that, the seed of something new had been planted. She felt a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness, as though she were standing on the edge of something unknown. The next day, she found herself at the same cafe. It was the place where everything had started, and even though she had promised herself not to get too caught up in it, there was something about the place that made her feel like anything was possible. She arrived early, wanting to get there before Adam, so she could collect her thoughts and maybe figure out exactly what she was hoping for from this meeting. Was she looking for answers? For closure? Or was she just curious about him, about what had drawn him to her in the first place? She sat at a small table by the window, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup as she stared out at the bustling street. People hurried past, lost in their own worlds, just as she had been before that fateful day. Minutes later, the door opened, and Adam walked in. She immediately recognized him, though his presence still took her by surprise. He was dressed casually, but there was an effortless elegance to the way he carried himself, like someone who was used to moving through life with confidence. He spotted her right away and made his way over, his smile warm and genuine. "Hey," he said, sitting down across from her. "It's good to see you again." She smiled back, though it felt a little awkward at first. "You too," she replied. "Thanks for reaching out." "No problem," he said, settling in. "I meant it when I said I enjoyed our conversation. You seem like someone who's got a lot on their plate, but you handle it with a lot of grace." She felt a flush of warmth at his words, though she wasn't sure if he was just being polite. Still, there was something in the way he looked at her, something that made her feel like she wasn't just another person to him. They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the cafe filling the space between them. It was nice, peaceful even. "So," she began, breaking the silence, "how's your day been?" Adam leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. "Busy as always. But that's nothing new." He paused, then added with a smile, "I don't mind it. Keeps things interesting." She nodded, feeling a little unsure of what to say next. She didn't want to come off as too eager, but she was curious. There was so much she didn't know about him. "So what do you do exactly?" she asked, her voice tentative. Adam's expression shifted slightly, and for a brief second she thought he might hesitate. But then he smiled, that same calm smile that had put her at ease before. "I'm in business," he said simply, "but I'm sure that doesn't tell you much." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That's putting it mildly," he chuckled. "Fair enough. Let's just say I'm someone who has a lot of responsibilities. It's not always easy to explain, but it keeps me busy." She tried to read his face, but he was as composed as ever, not giving away anything more than what he had already said. "Do you enjoy it?" she asked cautiously, not wanting to sound too probing. Adam took a moment to think. I do, he said finally. But it's not just about the work. It's about the challenge, the people I meet, the things I get to learn along the way. She was quiet for a moment, absorbing his words. He spoke with such ease, like everything he did had purpose, like he wasn't just moving through life but truly living it. She couldn't help but wonder what his life was really like. "And what about you?" he asked, bringing her back to the present. "How do you manage everything? I know you've got a lot on your plate, too." She blinked, surprised by the question. She hadn't expected him to turn the conversation back to her. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I just do what I have to. It's not easy, but I don't really have a choice. I've got my kid, my job. There's always something to take care of." Adam nodded. "I get it. Life can be overwhelming sometimes. But you seem to handle it well." She smiled softly, though it felt more like a mask than anything else. "Thanks. I try." For a few moments, they both sat in comfortable silence, sipping their drinks and letting the conversation naturally ebb and flow. It felt nice, easy even. But beneath the calm surface, there was a question that lingered in the back of her mind. Why was he really here? Why did he reach out to her? Finally, after a while, she couldn't hold it in anymore. "Why did you want to meet again?" she asked, her voice soft but direct. "I mean, I appreciate it. But I'm just curious. What's the real reason?" Adam didn't seem taken aback by the question, though there was a brief flicker in his eyes. He paused, collecting his thoughts before answering. "I don't know," he said slowly, his tone thoughtful. "Maybe I saw something in you that I don't see in a lot of people. You're strong, you're resilient. I guess I just wanted to get to know you more." His words hit her harder than she expected. She felt a flutter in her chest, though she quickly tried to brush it off. She wasn't sure if she was ready to let anyone in, especially someone like him, but at the same time, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't just surviving, she was living. It had been a week since their meeting, and she found herself thinking about it more than she had expected. Every conversation with Adam, every smile, every subtle moment of connection had stuck with her. It wasn't just the intriguing mystery of his life that kept her awake at night. It was the way he made her feel, like she wasn't just a single mom struggling to get by, but a person with value, with strength, with potential. She tried not to overthink it, but it was hard. Life had always been about surviving, never about truly living. But with Adam, something felt different. There was a quiet intensity to him, a calm that seemed to fill the spaces around him. He reached out again a few days later, sending a message that brought a flutter to her chest. "I know you're busy, but would you like to grab dinner this weekend? I'd really enjoy spending some more time with you." The words were simple, but they sent a rush of thoughts through her mind. She had always been careful about where she put her time and energy. As a mother, she had learned to protect her heart and her focus. But there was something about Adam that made it hard to push him away, even if she didn't fully understand why he was reaching out to her. After a moment of hesitation, she replied, "I'd like that. Dinner sounds nice." That was all it took. They agreed on a day, a time, and a place. When the evening arrived, she found herself standing in front of her closet, unsure of what to wear. It wasn't a date, not really, but it felt like it could be, and that made her nervous. She wasn't used to this feeling. She hadn't been on a date in so long, and the thought of opening herself up to someone again brought a mixture of excitement and fear. After a few minutes of indecision, she settled on something simple but elegant, a dress that made her feel confident without trying too hard. She didn't want to seem like she was overthinking it, but at the same time she wanted to look nice. She deserved to feel nice. She checked the time again and left her apartment, the anticipation growing with every step. The city lights blurred past as she drove to the restaurant, her mind racing with questions she couldn't quite answer. What would this evening be like? Was she ready for it? When she arrived, Adam was already there, standing near the entrance, looking as composed and effortless as ever. He looked up when he saw her, and his smile was warm, genuine. "You look great," he said, his voice calm but with a note of admiration that made her cheeks flush. "Thank you," she replied, suddenly feeling a bit shy. It was strange. She had never felt this nervous before. They were led to a table in a quiet corner of the restaurant, the soft hum of background music making everything feel intimate, almost like the world outside didn't exist. As they sat down, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. They had already connected on some level, but tonight felt different. It felt personal. "I'm glad you agreed to meet," Adam said, his eyes locking with hers. "I know you're busy and I didn't want to pressure you." She smiled, the tension in her shoulders slowly releasing. "I'm glad you asked. It's been a while since I've had a chance to just relax." He leaned back slightly in his chair, studying her with an intensity she wasn't used to, but it didn't make her uncomfortable. It was as if he was genuinely interested in knowing who she was, not just as a mother but as a person. "Tell me about your day," he said, his voice soft and easy. "How's everything been going?" She appreciated how he didn't dive into anything heavy right away. It felt natural, like the conversation was just two people connecting over a shared experience. She paused for a moment, thinking about the question. "Busy," she said, smiling slightly, "but I'm used to it. You know, balancing work and everything else. It's always a challenge." "I can imagine," he replied. "But I've seen how you handle it. It's not easy, and yet you make it look so effortless." Her heart skipped a beat at his words. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that, how much she needed someone to acknowledge what she was going through, even in a small way. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means a lot to me." The waiter arrived with their menus, and for a few moments they focused on choosing what to eat. She found herself easing into the rhythm of the evening, the nerves she had felt earlier slowly dissolving. This felt like a real connection, not just a fleeting moment. It felt genuine, they ordered, and as they waited for their food, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. They talked about their favorite books, their childhood memories, even their favorite places to travel. It was easy, natural, and before long, she found herself laughing at his stories, feeling like she was finally able to let go of the stress and worry that had consumed her life for so long. But as the night went on, a quiet question lingered in her mind. Why was he here? Why had he reached out to her? Someone who was so far removed from his world. He was clearly successful, influential, someone who could have anyone in his life. So why her? Finally, as their meal came to an end, the question that had been lingering in the back of her mind slipped out. "I have to ask," she said, her voice softer now. "Why did you want to meet with me again? I mean, I appreciate it, but I'm curious. What is it that drew you to me?" Adam didn't hesitate. His eyes softened, and for a moment he seemed lost in thought. "I can't quite explain it," he said slowly, "but when I met you, I saw something in you that I don't see every day. There's strength in you, something real, and I wanted to know more. It's not about your past or your circumstances. It's about who you are right now. I admire that." His words hit her harder than she expected, settling deep in her chest. She had always thought of herself as just a mom, a worker, a woman trying to survive. But Adam saw something more. "Thank you," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. The night went on, but now there was a different energy between them. It wasn't just two people enjoying a meal. It was two people opening up, connecting in a way that neither of them had anticipated. By the time they left the restaurant, she felt a sense of lightness she hadn't experienced in years. As they stood outside, he turned to her with that same gentle smile. "I'm glad we did this," he said. "I feel like I've learned so much about you in such a short time." "I feel the same way," she replied, surprised by how true that felt. He paused for a moment as if weighing something in his mind, before speaking again. "If you ever want to talk or just get away for a while, don't hesitate to reach out." Her heart fluttered. There was an invitation in his words, a door left open, and she felt a strange pull toward it, though she wasn't sure if she was ready to walk through it just yet. "Thank you, Adam," she said quietly, the words feeling full of meaning. With that, they parted ways. But as she drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Something in her had changed. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was starting to live again. It had been a few weeks since that dinner, and as time passed, she found herself thinking more and more about Adam. At first, it had all felt so unexpected, their meeting, the connection they shared, and the way he made her feel seen in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. But now things felt different. There was a calm certainty in her heart that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Despite the fact that she hadn't expected anything to come of it, she couldn't deny the growing bond between them. Every time they spoke, every moment they shared, she felt a little more like herself. It wasn't just about Adam. It was about how he made her feel about her own life, her own strength, and her own potential. For the first time in a long while, she was beginning to imagine a future that wasn't just about surviving, but about truly living. But even as her feelings grew, so did the uncertainty. She had always been careful about who she allowed into her life. She had been hurt before, and the thought of opening up to someone, even someone as genuine as Adam, was both exciting and terrifying. She didn't want to make the same mistakes again, and she didn't want to bring anyone into her world who might cause even more chaos. Still, there was something about Adam that made it hard to keep her distance. He had never asked for anything from her. He had never tried to push her into a relationship or make her feel like she owed him anything. It was his patience, his quiet understanding that had drawn her in. He didn't try to fix her or rescue her or make her feel like she needed to change. He simply accepted her for who she was. One afternoon, a few days after their last meeting, Adam sent her a text. It was brief, but it left her heart racing. "I was thinking about you today. I have an event this weekend and I'd love for you to join me. It's nothing formal, just some colleagues and friends, but it would be great to see you there." She stared at the message for a long moment. Her first instinct was to say no. She wasn't ready to enter his world, the world of business events and high-powered meetings. It felt like stepping into a place she didn't belong. But then again, something inside her told her she couldn't keep hiding forever. She had already allowed him into her life, and now she had to trust herself enough to step into his. After a few moments of hesitation, she typed a response. "I'd love to come. I'll see you there." The moment she hit send, she felt a mix of excitement and nerves. What had she just agreed to? Was she ready for this? The weekend came quickly, and as she stood in front of her closet, she felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. She had no idea what to wear to an event like this. She didn't own any designer dresses or expensive jewelry. Her life had never been about those things. But she didn't want to show up looking out of place. After a long search, she finally settled on something simple yet elegant. A dress that made her feel confident without being over the top. When she arrived at the venue, she immediately felt the difference. The atmosphere was upscale, polished, and buzzing with the kind of energy that made her feel like an outsider. She tried to push the feeling down, but it lingered. She walked in slowly, scanning the room for Adam. And then she saw him, standing by the bar, talking with a small group of people. As always, he looked effortlessly at ease. His posture relaxed, his presence commanding yet unassuming. When he saw her, his face lit up and he excused himself from the conversation to walk over to her. "Hey," he said, his smile warm. "You made it." "I almost didn't," she admitted, her voice nervous. "This place is a lot more formal than I expected." He chuckled, his eyes softening. "Yeah, it can be a bit intimidating, but I'm glad you're here. Come on, let me introduce you to a few people." She followed him through the crowd, feeling a bit out of place but doing her best to stay composed. Adam's presence was calming, and she found herself relaxing a little as they mingled. It was clear that he was well known in the room. People greeted him with respect, and some even seemed to gravitate toward him. She couldn't help but admire how effortlessly he moved through the crowd, like he belonged here, like he had always been a part of this world. As they made their way to the bar, she noticed a few glances her way, but she couldn't tell if it was curiosity or admiration. "I know it's a lot," Adam said quietly, sensing her discomfort. "But you're doing great." She smiled at him, grateful for his support. "Thanks. I'm just not used to all of this." "You're not alone," he said with a wink. "But it's good to see you here. It means a lot to me." She nodded, trying to shake off the lingering feeling of being an outsider. She wasn't just here as Adam's guest. She was here because she had chosen to be. She had made the decision to step out of her comfort zone, and that alone was something to be proud of. As the evening wore on, she found herself having more conversations, connecting with people she never would have imagined she'd have anything in common with. She wasn't just a single mom anymore. She was a woman with her own story, her own voice, and her own value. She didn't need to hide or be ashamed of her past. It was part of who she was, and she had come a long way. When the night came to a close, Adam walked her out to the car. "That wasn't so bad, right?" he asked, his voice teasing. She laughed, feeling more at ease than she had all evening. "No, it wasn't. Thank you for bringing me. I wasn't sure I'd fit in, but I think I did okay." "You did more than okay," he said, his tone sincere. I'm glad you came. As they stood there for a moment, the cool night air wrapping around them, she realized something. She had been afraid to let anyone into her world. She had kept her walls up for so long, convinced that she didn't deserve the kind of connection that Adam was offering. But here she was, standing in front of him, feeling more alive than she had in years. I'm glad I came too, she said softly. Thank you, Adam. He smiled, his eyes searching hers for a moment before he spoke again. You don't have to thank me. I'm just happy you're here, and if you ever need someone to talk to, I'll be here. As she drove home that night, her heart felt lighter. She wasn't sure what the future held, or where her connection with Adam would go. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be, not just with Adam, but with herself. It was an ordinary Tuesday when the phone rang. She had been expecting it, but that didn't make the call any easier. It was from the school. The voice on the other end was calm, professional even, but it did nothing to ease the tight knot in her stomach. Your son, the voice started, has been involved in an incident here today. Her heart sank. It wasn't the first time she had received a call like this, but each time, it felt like it was her fault. What had he done now? Was he hurt? Was it something worse? She tried to stay calm, her fingers gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. What happened? She asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound composed. The woman on the other end took a deep breath, then explained that her son had been in an argument with another student. Nothing too serious, she assured her. But still, the mention of an incident was enough to send her mind spinning. Can you come to the school as soon as possible? The woman asked. Her stomach turned, but she agreed without hesitation. The drive to the school felt longer than usual. It wasn't a far distance, just a few blocks, but today it felt like a lifetime. The car was quiet except for the hum of the engine, and her thoughts raced. She tried to think back to the last time she had spoken with her son about his behavior at school. Had she missed something? Was there a deeper issue she hadn't picked up on? When she arrived at the school, her mind was a blur. She walked quickly through the entrance, her heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she wasn't prepared for what she saw when she entered the principal's office. Her son, usually so full of life, was sitting quietly in a chair, his hands folded in his lap. His head was down and he didn't look up when she entered the room. The principal, a tall woman with stern features, was sitting across from him, flipping through a folder on her desk. Thank you for coming, the principal said, not even looking up as she spoke. Please have a seat. Her mind was racing, but she forced herself to sit down. Her eyes stayed on her son, her heart breaking as she watched him. What was he thinking right now? What had happened to the energetic, happy boy she knew? She couldn't help but feel guilty. Was it her fault? Was she not paying enough attention to him? The principal finally looked up, her gaze cool and businesslike. We had a bit of a confrontation today, she began. Apparently, your son got into an argument with one of his classmates. It escalated to the point where they were both sent to the office. Her son remained silent, his eyes downcast. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers twitched nervously. This wasn't like him. What happened? She asked, her voice soft but firm, wanting to hear it from him. The principal turned to her son. Why don't you tell your mother what happened? Her son shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable. For a moment, it seemed like he wasn't going to say anything at all. Then in a quiet voice, he muttered, It was just a fight. A stupid fight. Her heart clenched. She had never wanted him to grow up in a world where fighting was the answer to anything. But it wasn't just the fight that bothered her. It was the fact that he was sitting there refusing to explain. There was something else, something he wasn't saying. Why don't you want to talk about it? She asked gently, trying to get him to open up. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at the floor, avoiding her gaze. She could tell he was struggling with something. What had triggered the fight? What was he afraid of? I don't know, he finally whispered. I didn't mean to do it. The principal cleared her throat, bringing her attention back to her. I understand that your son didn't intend for the situation to escalate, but I do need to inform you that this is becoming a recurring issue. We've spoken before about his behavior, and it seems like there's an ongoing pattern. Her stomach dropped at the mention of patterns. She had always known her son could be impulsive, but she had hoped it was just a phase. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe this was something deeper, something she hadn't addressed properly. The principal continued, We want to help, but it's clear that the behavior isn't changing. I recommend some counseling or behavioral therapy if you're open to it. She nodded, though her mind was still spinning. She wasn't sure what she was feeling anymore. Was she angry at him? Disappointed? Or was she just afraid? The principal's voice softened slightly. I know this isn't easy, but we're here to support you. If there's anything we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out. She didn't know what to say. All she could do was look at her son, still sitting there, his face blank and unreadable. She wanted to reach out, to hold him, to tell him that everything would be okay, but she didn't know how. She didn't know how to fix what had been broken. When they left the office, her son didn't say a word. He didn't even look at her as they walked to the car. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. What was there to say? How could she explain to him that she was scared? Scared of what was happening to him and scared of what this all meant for their future? The drive home was silent. Her mind was filled with questions, each one leading to another, but none of them had an answer. She didn't know what the right next step was. Therapy? Tough love? Maybe a little bit of both. She had no idea. When they got home, her son went straight to his room, shutting the door behind him. She stood in the hallway for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Should she go after him? Should she leave him alone? She had always tried to balance being there for him with giving him space, but this felt different. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't figure out what it was. After a while, she made her way to the kitchen, trying to gather her thoughts. She had always prided herself on being strong, on handling whatever life threw her way. But today, she felt helpless. She didn't have the answers. She didn't know how to fix this. As she stood there staring out the window, she realized something. Maybe it wasn't about fixing him. Maybe it was about understanding him. Maybe it was about listening to him and helping him figure things out for himself. She wasn't sure how to do that yet, but she was going to try. She walked to her son's room and knocked softly on the door. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice gentle. After a few seconds, the door opened and her son stood there, his expression still guarded. She took a deep breath. "I'm not mad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to understand." For the first time that day, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her believe that despite everything, there was hope. "I know you're trying," she added, her heart swelling with the smallest bit of reassurance. "And I'm here. We'll figure this out together." He nodded, and for the first time in a long while, they both felt like they were taking a small step forward.